So the session today will be in English, as I'm guessing that we could at least have a few English-speaking participants, but also since we have an ardent guest in Steve Pereira with us, who does not speak Swedish yet, at least, working on that. So we'll do it in English. Hope that is okay. I know we will also be recording this meeting for your knowledge, so we can also maybe send it to you afterwards. Since we have a very short session, only 30 minutes, we want your questions, but we would like them to be written down in the Q&A function. You have a button on the top of your Teams app, I guess. It's either Q&A or frågor and svar in Swedish, if you have the Swedish version. So if you click that, you have the opportunity to add your questions, and we have some hardworking colleagues with us here who will try to answer those questions during the session, if time permits, so to speak. Otherwise, we will try to answer afterwards and send them out to you. So I hope that is okay. Now, Anders, I think you can switch to the next.
Yeah.
So today's session is about, it's called From Friction to Flow, and it's all about the need for flow. On the screen here, you see just examples of things that we, in our experience with working with customers out there that have the need to sort of improve their delivery in several aspects. These are things that are examples that might prevent or could also be enablers for flow, but it's important to understand which of them and why they and where they are to really sort of be able to address the real bottlenecks in flow. If you click again, Anders. And the people talking today, it is first Think Flow, which I'm a part of, and I have 4 of my colleagues with me in this meeting. So if you give the audience a wave, guys, they can see who you are. They will be helping me either talking or managing the Q&As or the Teams meeting as such. We are a company that try to help our customers with flow-related issues, making things come out faster and with better quality. We also have Steve Pereira with us from Visible Flow Consulting, and Steve is also one of 2 authors behind the book Flow Engineering. And Steve, you will be doing most of the talking today, but I'll leave the word to you in just a bit. But good to have you here.
Glad to be here.
If you click again, Anders.
Yeah.
Just some contextual introductions. What you see before you is a screen with some very common symptoms that we often recognize from the organizations that we work with. I'm sure that you recognize a few of them. In these organizations, people work most often very, very hard and dedicated, trying to get as much stuff out there. Could be digital products, digital delivery, whatever, either product development or product delivery flows. And a common wish in this organization is that we need to get more stuff out, increase throughput. We need to shorten the lead time to make market deadlines, or we are forced to do so much rework because we have so many defects and our predictability is not that good. We would need to understand when we can expect things to come out there. These are very common things that is wished for. And there's also a lot of people working with trying to improve processes, trying to sort of change the ways of working to improve flow. If you click again, Anders. Although knowing where the real bottlenecks are and where we should actually aim our efforts is sometimes very, very hard. This picture it's an AI-generated picture, as I'm sure you can see, but it's a representation of a very common environment in which we work in. You have people in offices and possibly by computers building software. It could also be hardware or something else. But what is very common here is that you cannot see where the flow is, or where it isn't, where it's halted, where you have the bottlenecks, right? So you can have a best guess, it might be, I don't know, in the next door department, or it could be that you have too little competence of some sort in a specific place in the organization or whatever. The big need here is to create visibility to understand how work actually flows. And that is the theme for today. We are going to introduce, or Steve mostly will help us to introduce some practices that can help us to create this visibility, so that when we do our improvements, we do not just jump to conclusions and throw maybe already thought out ready solutions to problems that might not be addressed by those solutions. So for that reason, we'll ask Steve to join us today, and I think I'll leave the introduction of yourself to you, Steve, and also then go ahead to do your presentation.
All right. So I'm in here twice now, but as long as there's no echo, we're good. All right. So flow engineering, is really aimed at this challenge of getting more done, especially with the resources, the talent, the time, the capacity, the tools that we have available today in our environments. And that's really important because it's very frustrating to be told, oh, you can do better. You just need to get X, Y, Z. You need this tool. You need to perfect your data. You need talent that you don't have. All of that is not helpful, right? We need to be acting based on what we have available today. So that's where flow engineering is focused, but it's really not about volume of work. It's about getting the right work done. So we want to focus on actually value and quality and prioritization and focus. It's not enough to just generate more work, right? The value in AI and generative AI and new capabilities isn't just in generating more noise and more garbage for us to clean up. It's in clarifying our focus, in creating better outcomes. So what we're trying to do with flow engineering is really take this invisible realm of knowledge work, right? You see that office where everybody is working, but nobody can see what's actually going on, and make that invisible work visible. And we do that through mapping. So we map multiple different areas of flow, starting with our focus on a target outcome that's very valuable to the organization, right? We want to understand what is really going to make a difference in our environment and to our customers, because we all have a million things to chase. But what's really important is that we chase the most important thing to our customers and to the business. So we start by clarifying, what are we really trying to achieve, more so than everything else that's distracting us or occupying our time? And we do that as a group in order to all get on the same page, all align towards a clear vision of the future. And then we step into the work as it exists today. We map value streams to understand what is the flow that work actually travels through the organization and out to customers today. In a digital context, we're talking about product teams, service teams, blends of different teams where work is actually traveling through the organization. And we can analyze that work and make it visible by mapping it with a value stream map. But we go deeper. When we find issues in the value stream map, we dig into them with a dependency map. So a dependency map really represents our ability to kind of zoom into those problem areas that we identify and diagnose what's actually happening in those areas. And then we take that information, what we find and what we realize through mapping the current state, and we create a future state value stream map. We reimagine how would work flow if we were to change the way that we work, change the steps that are performed, the order of steps performed, the separation of different activities across different departments or different roles. We change the tooling, we change how we use tooling. And all of that ends up not just as a concept, but as actionable steps for us to pursue. So a flow roadmap is essentially a roadmap with extra features to make it more useful. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we go all the way to action, ownership, and measurement in flow engineering. We don't just say, well, we'll try better next time, or here's a great picture. Hopefully we get there someday. We break that down into actual actions that we will do now and in the future with a high degree of clarity, because we want to actually be changing the environment. We want to actually be improving flow. And so talking about it is one thing, getting everybody together is another thing, but we want to actually make change. So that's our primary focus, beyond just creating maps. Okay, so you'll ask, getting everybody together, I said, who's getting together? Who are we bringing together when we do flow engineering? We have, for example, a mobile application development process. And the most important person that we kind of bring to the table with flow engineering is a sponsor who can not only validate that this is an important thing to invest in, but also unlock our capacity to make change in the environment. Maybe they're providing budget, maybe they're providing some capacity, maybe they're helping us shift priorities so that we can actually spend some time sharpening the saw rather than just sawing away. And so that's very important. It's also important to have facilitation. So I've spent about a decade getting good at this, but I'm sure you have lots of facilitators in your environment who already know how to run an effective workshop, know how to run even a good board game. People who can guide a group of people towards an outcome or through a process is really important for this, because it's very easy for people to get confused when you bring them together to get something done, unless someone is guiding the process. But we're looking really for perspectives from people across the value stream. So representation from your critical roles and capabilities like design and product and QA and operations and development. We bring them all together. We don't want tons of people in a workshop, but up to 12, 15 people can be very effective. And that's how we're going to be able to make the invisible workflow visible. We use their understanding, their familiarity with the workflow to map and create that understanding. So what this looks like in terms of mapping a value stream, the primary flow of activity that we look at in flow engineering, we start with this target outcome, right? We use outcome mapping to get really clear on what are we trying to achieve. And then we work backwards, because working backwards is much clearer and simpler and easier to follow than working forwards. There's more about that in the book and elsewhere, but this is easier to trace from the customer backwards. So we work backwards from value is delivered to the customer, and step back through all the activities that are involved in creating that value, all the way from the inception of the process, right? A ticket's created, or somebody approaches a team with a problem or an idea. And what's really valuable about this, beyond just visibility, is measurement. We actually add measures to each of these activities. So above, you can see that we're measuring cycle time, the time it takes for each of these activities to be performed. But we also, and this is really important, where most of the value gets lost is in this wait time between those stages. So below, you see this measurement of time passing between each stage. And that's where a lot of your value gets stuck, is in waiting for different groups to pick up work, different roles to pick up the work when it's done with a previous stage. So we measure all this, and that allows us to collect some data on some important metrics. One being, how long does it take from an idea creation to being delivered to customers? How long are customers waiting for a change or a fix in our environment? And then what percentage of that time is actually spent waiting? And in most organizations, this wait time is actually much more than the active working time. In this example, it's somewhat simplified, but what we find when we pull all that data out of everyone's minds and all of our experience, and what we're looking for is what happens most of the time. We have this focal point. Something stands out that is taking way more time than everything else. And so we go from everybody has a ton of problems and we all have a gigantic list of problems to we have this one area that's causing us more trouble than anything else. So we immediately create this collective focus, and that allows us to act much more effectively than going to chase 20 different things and then trying to measure the positive impact of any of those efforts, right? We focus on something that we think is going to make the greatest impact on overall flow. And this is really important because when we have a constraint in a value stream, right? When we have flow that's impeded at a particular point, a bottleneck, a constraint, something where we have to go outside to another group to make progress, what happens? We have people who are blocked, who don't just like sitting around, right? They know they're getting paid. So what do? They start another item, right? They start some other task, or they go and interrupt someone else's task, right? Because all of a sudden they can't move forward. Let's start something else, or let's go see if I can ask this person about this thing I always wanted to know about, or the status of this thing. So this is like a compounding effect of making everything worse, right? Because we know that trying to do multiple things at once just means that everything slows down. So whenever we encounter a constraint, the most likely occurrence is that we're actually just going to be creating more complexity, more chaos, slowing things down even further. So it's very important for us to focus on these constraints and attack them and really try to minimize their impact as much as possible. That's what flow engineering is really all about. Okay, so let's say we have this understanding of the current state of flow and the value stream. Dependency mapping is an effort to kind of dig deeper into this area that we've identified, right? So we zoom in, we find out what's really happening in those areas, right? We had a high level view, we zoom down into the details to try to understand what's really happening here. And we can identify some hotspots within that lower level of granularity, that extra level of detail, so we can understand why is this happening? Why is this taking so long? And there can be multiple reasons, right? We can dig really deep into each of these areas. We can do things like 5 whys. You can use all the tools of lean. You can use all the tools of problem solving here. Flow engineering is really compatible with everything that you would do to solve performance problems. And once we have that, we essentially try to identify interventions. And this gets us creating our future state map, right? What are we going to do to change the system to address these areas that are causing us trouble? And we identify all of that. We can also then anticipate or predict a performance improvement as a result of those actions, right? We work with the team to find out if we do these things, does it get us to our target? Does it get us far enough, or do we need to keep digging? So all of this allows us to kind of create this future state vision. We will reorganize the value stream. Sometimes we run things in parallel, or we change a working relationship with a dependency. And this all gets us to a state where we are improving constraint in the value stream. But you might ask, I mean, you have multiple teams, right? I would imagine that nobody has one team in their organization. Nobody has one value stream in their organization. But what happens is once we map 1 or 2 value streams, we're identifying these conditions that are problematic for every single area of the business, right? All of our product teams have this same challenge. They all have environment issues. They all have data quality issues. And so by addressing one of these constraints, we're actually raising the tide and raising all of those boats up. All of those teams are improving performance when we address constraints, because oftentimes they're common constraints. They're shared services, they're problematic data or access concerns. They could be approval processes that are very slow. That's one major aspect that gets you multiples of ROI based on just a small amount of mapping. The other thing that I like to talk about is that by mapping, we create this opportunity for us to have better conversations across the organization, right? In so many organizations, we have tech folks and we have business folks, and they don't speak the same language. They have a really hard time communicating with each other. On the business side, what a map allows us to do is to understand what tech is talking about when they talk about, well, we could go faster if this condition was addressed, or, we have these problems in this area. And we don't have to get into the technical details. We can just point to the point on the map. We can understand very quickly the causal factors behind that constraint. But this works both ways, right? The tech folks can understand more about what matters to the business, obviously throughput, feedback, learning, the ability to deliver and satisfy customers is super important. And then from the tech side, they need the business to understand the impacts of technical debt, the impacts of dependencies, the impacts of approvals and requirements, and onerous process or toil. So this gives us an opportunity to get on the same page and really have effective conversations about what do we do together to improve the system of work across the organization. So on everyone's minds right now is AI. What is the AI angle here? In so many organizations, we're working away, and all of a sudden we have AI in the mix. We have probably developers who are very quickly taking advantage of these capabilities, allowing them to produce much more. But really what happens in areas where you are accelerating a part of your flow without addressing the constraint is that you're just now overloading the constraint even more, right? I mean, your constraint is always the slowest point. It's always going to be feeling like it can't keep up with flow. Probably your testing organization, your environments are probably feeling a strain already. And if you accelerate your development with AI, all of a sudden, you're just making that situation even more and more challenging, which means you have the new whip creation while things are waiting, people are starting new stuff, and everything is getting worse and worse, right? So this also doesn't improve the lives of people downstream who are waiting for the work to be delivered, because they're still going to be waiting. They're just hearing about more things that are in progress, more things that should be coming that aren't coming. So there's a couple of things that we still see. We're seeing these kind of exacerbated by AI use, right? We're building more, we're doing before we sort of like fully understand the problem space. We're putting out less tested code because we can just build it and ship it and get feedback from production. These aren't necessary, but they're what we're seeing across many client environments, many surveys. And what we really should be asking is what's really holding us back? What's actually having an impact on our customers, not just our ability to do fun and cool things or interesting things or what we think is valuable? What's actually holding us back from satisfying our customers? So it could be opportunities for things like simulation, for improving our feedback loops, for doing better dependency analysis. These are things that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about with AI, and hopefully these become major focuses so that instead of overloading your constraints, you're able to actually add these interventions where they matter most. All right. Hopefully that hasn't left us with zero time. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm just going to mention just a few seconds on this one. So needless to say that we ThinkFlow, we are pretty fond of flow engineering, right? But you mentioned a lot of the good stuff. I think that the backbone is the mapping, the end-to-end process. We have experienced that that's quite easy to get going with. It's maps that are sort of connected throughout flow engineering. So it's very much a structured end-to-end approach. It gives them a common understanding. You mentioned that you create a common language and people get onboarded and they get, engaged, and it brings clarity, so to speak. So I'm just rushing through these slides a little bit. But we feel that it's a missing piece essentially from seeing other parts that sort of are loosely connected, like doing value stream mapping, and then you do probably improvements of flow somewhere else, etc. So it's a coherent end-to-end approach. So I'm just going to stop at that, and then if you can move to the next slide. So we just do a little bit of marketing as well, of course. So we have an upcoming training schedule. I think, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but this might be the first one we do in the Sweden and the Nordics, right? So
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So we encourage people to take the opportunity to of course, enroll. So this training is going to be very much a sort of a hands-on training or full-day workshop or training, where you will be, if you were to join the training, you will be equipped with a lot of this stuff that Steve was talking about, the proper tools, so that you can actually bring home to your own organization and start improving flow essentially. So it's not a theoretical one-day workshop, so to speak. So it's very much a hands-on training. So we will provide you with this material later on as well, so you can use the link to register if you're interested in learning a lot more about how to actually use flow engineering. And you can actually move to the next one, I guess.
Sure. I think we could probably call it there, but we can we can jump to our thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining.